I'm totally afraid. I'm afraid of everything. I'm afraid of losing. I'm afraid of being humiliated. But I'm totally confident. The closer I get to the ring, the more confidence I get. The closer, I'm more confident.
The new definition of confidence. Confidence is the willingness to try.
My confidence comes from both my faith and in the fact that I keep promises I make to myself.
Borrow confidence from the past.
Confidence.
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 Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm just going to give it a quick couple of minutes for more folks to log in. And good, I can see that some of you are already answering our poll questions in the chat box, which is awesome. So thanks again for joining. And in addition to the poll questions, if you want to go ahead and just text in the chat box where you're calling in from, your location, that'd be great. Awesome. Got some Texans, got some folks from international locations. I love seeing where everyone's calling in from on these things. It's just so fun. Great, keep those coming. We'll go ahead and get started. I will apologize. I'm sure you all are in much of the same boat as I am, that I'm working from home. My husband and I are both at the same time on calls. So hopefully you can't hear him too loudly, but as I'm sure you all are doing this as well, we just sort of work through it. So again, thank you for joining. In terms of what we're going to talk about today, we're going to go over basically a very high-level overview of our full-time 2-year MBA program at Mccombs. So if you wanted a deeper dive, we do have some other visit options that I will recommend more towards the end of the presentation. We're going to keep this pretty high level. My name is Stacey Batas. I'm a senior MBA recruitment and admissions officer for the full-time MBA program at UT. I've been with the team about 5 years, so definitely am a good go-to for any admissions related questions and even program related questions as well. In addition to me on the call today, I also have a very recently graduated class of 2020 student, Lola. And Lola, I'm not sure if you can broadcast your sound or not, but if you can just briefly introduce yourself, that would be great.
Can you guys hear me?
Could be technical difficulties. Lola, can you just chat in the chat box maybe, and we can just have you answer some questions from the chat box if you're unable to broadcast. And as she does that, we will move on. So the first thing we want to go over today is the classroom experience. Looking at the Common Core experience, we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk a little bit about team-based learning model, really what we're all about at Mccombs, and then of course the top-ranked faculty. So as I mentioned earlier, we are a 2-year program, so starting at the very basic level of what we are. So your first year is really a foundational year, and especially your first semester is a very foundational semester. So your first semester is when you're going to complete all of your core courses. So as you talk to some of our current students, they may discuss core a lot. It's probably going to be the toughest semester academically of the program. As you can see, we smash a lot of classes in one semester. So essentially breaking it up into 2 mini-mesters. These are required for every single student, regardless of skill. And the reason we, for example, don't let accountants, perhaps with the CPA, not take accounting is because we think it is value back to that team-based approach of learning from each other and leaning on each other for each other's strengths and weaknesses. So, you may have zero quantitative background, but we are really hoping that our study teams that we put in place and the cohort-based learning model that we put in place is going to help you succeed in these classes. So within the core class, you're going to have really 65 to 70 folks of your cohort. So we break up the class of 260 to about 4 cohorts. And then within that cohort, you're also placed in a study team of about 5-ish. So everyone in that study team, it's very purposely made up of very diverse folks. So, the whole idea again is everyone is bringing a different strength to the table throughout these core classes. And then your second semester, you're going to start to sort of dally in electives and choosing your custom classes. So you'll see that custom core there. That's really where you're choosing from a set of courses. So a little bit more limited than just any old elective, but you are able to customize which classes you take, perhaps based on your career goals. So if you're more leaning toward finance, you might take valuation as a custom core, for example, or we have some marketing analytics classes. So lots of flexibility. As you can see, about half of your first year and your entire second year is self-selected. So we really value that flexible curriculum throughout the program. And with those electives, we do have what we call concentrations. Oh, Lola, I think you're on. Hello? Good. I think Lola got her broadcast working, perhaps. Lola, feel free to confirm if you are indeed able to introduce yourself. If not, I'll keep rolling. Cool. We'll keep rolling. As I'm sure you all experience as well, technical difficulties are pretty much a daily occurrence with with working virtually lately. So we sort of roll with it here. Okay, so again, to the concentrations, we allow you to really pick your classes. And I think the concentrations can be a little bit confusing. They are essentially roadmaps for you to really help select classes, but they are at no point actually officially tracked. So if you want to sort of dally in some supply chain classes, dally in some finance or marketing classes, you really are able to mix and match the concentrations to your desire. They're really just there. Oh, Lola, yay! We can. Hey, good morning. Technical difficulties. Yeah, well, we can hear you fine now, Lola. If you wouldn't just mind introducing yourself briefly, where you're from, what you did before MBA, and what you're doing after would be great. Awesome. Thanks, Lola. Since we're on the concentration topic, can you maybe talk a little bit about how you approached choosing your classes, whether you used a concentration or whether you didn't? Awesome. That's, I think, really helpful just to see what a student does. And one thing I will briefly highlight on the concentration piece, I know some of you may be calling in from international locations. So we have applied for STEM designation. That STEM designation will only apply to certain concentrations. So everything I just said about not having to declare a concentration would change if you are international and interested in STEM designation. And yes, Jade, entrepreneurship is a concentration. So good question. So some sample elective courses. And Lola, I don't know, we can still hear you typing. So are you able to mute yourself perhaps when you're not? There should be a little microphone at the top, right? Cool. But thank you. If you can, so Lola's going to, as we go, if you do have some questions in the chat box, she's going to try and address those, or I can just verbally answer them as well as we go. So feel free to type any questions in the chat box. These are just some sample elective courses, just to give you a high level highlight of, our courses are very diverse in scope. And so we've got some really cool ones as well that, you don't necessarily have to be interested in sports as an industry to take the sports analytics with Kirk Goldsberry, who is an NBA analyst at ESPN. So lots of cool opportunities to take some really cool classes throughout your program. All right, so MBA Plus, I want to highlight, just in the interest of time, I saw that a lot of you have admissions questions, so I want to leave enough time at the end for admissions. So I'm going to really highlight one aspect of MBA Plus, which are our MBA Plus projects. In a nutshell, what these are experiential, hands-on opportunities to work with a company during the semester before you even start, in many cases, applying for internships. So most of our students will conduct an MBA Plus project in their fall semester of their first year, with the benefit of getting that experience on your resume before you apply to your internships in the spring of your first year. This is not at all required. So not every student will complete an MBA Plus project. They are team-based. So as you see the pictures there, you're working with the team of your classmates. But they are great, especially for career switchers or for folks that want to get some perhaps US company exposure before you apply for internships. To dabble in sort of a function or industry you're not maybe familiar with, for example. So Lola, I think you did an MBA Plus project. If you wouldn't mind just briefly highlighting maybe why you decided to do an MBA Plus and then what the experience was like. Yeah, those are really good points, Lila. And I see a couple of questions. So is everyone who wants to do an MBA Plus project selected? The short answer is if you want a Plus project, you will get one. We let you rank a certain number. So there could be a scenario, especially if you only selected one that you were interested in, that you wouldn't be selected for that one, especially if it's a very popular project. There are some projects that more folks tend to apply for. But there's over 60 options, and the teams are usually around 5 or so. So there's definitely a project for everyone. It's just a matter of, are you going to be smart and sort of rank your projects in order of your priority, or are you just one and done? Because that would be a potential where you might not get a project. We do them every semester, so you can do as many as you want. We actually this summer just, in terms of like everything being virtual right now and what that looks like, we actually currently have MBA Plus projects out for our students to apply for now. And so, that's something that I think companies love, the free labor of MBA students coming in and working on a problem. So I don't, there's never going to be a shortage of MBA Plus projects. If anything, we don't have enough students to fulfill the needs or the requests from companies. Some examples of projects. So we do some on a larger scale with big companies, like you'll see some of the big companies on the screen. So Deloitte, ExxonMobil, Google. Sometimes companies will do sort of a joint project. So you may work with a consulting firm on a project with Buc-ee's, which if you're not in Texas, you may not know Buc-ee's, but if you come to McCombs, you will definitely know Buc-ee's. It's a huge sort of gas station retailer in Texas. So you have anything from, a very large scale project like that to a smaller scale project with more startup sized companies. And they really do run the gamut of everything from, I saw a question about real estate, definitely, finance, consulting companies, tech, of course, lots of marketing projects. And so depending on what function you're interested in sort of getting exposure to, there's probably going to be a project. The more niche areas, like, for example, maybe sports or sports marketing, there's usually only 1 or 2 options in that field. So they're probably not going to be as plentiful as some other areas. But I really do personally believe that there's a really wide variety of projects that you can choose from. And it doesn't count for credit, and it's not paid. So I should have mentioned that at the beginning. But really the whole point of this is to get exposure. And that's also why we're never going to require it of students. I'd say probably out of about 260, there's usually around 150 students that will complete one. If you're interested in maybe just enhancing your career or more focused on entrepreneurship opportunities at McCombs, this is definitely not something that you have to do. So keep that in mind as well. Moving on, so we do have a lot of global opportunities as well. Obviously with COVID, some of this is on hold for the short term, but we're hopeful with progression in that area that we can open this back up for next year. The Patagonia trip in particular is over winter break. So that's, all of these are for credit, by the way. So that's where you take a leadership class in the fall and then actually travel to Patagonia with your classmates. We also have Global Connections trips over spring break, which is also for class credit, where you are learning about a particular location in a particular area of business, and then actually traveling to that location, visiting companies, et cetera, over the spring break. So some quick examples: we do energy in China, social entrepreneurship in South Africa, innovation in Israel has been one in the past. So they are pretty much very global, and sort of run the gamut in terms of topic as well. Lola, I should have asked you before we hopped on, did you do any international trips as a student your first year or second? Cool. Awesome. And yeah, you can also study abroad for a whole semester. So we have about 40 students that will choose that option. So I guess long story short, we've got a lot of options for you if that's something that you're really interested in. You did, that's right. Can you talk about that? Yeah. And usually, and you can probably speak to this as well, those semesters are shorter. So you actually, in most cases, get to return back to Austin and you're sort of done before everybody else, which is a nice bonus. And you don't miss any of the normal, disorientation and graduation activities as well if you do conduct one of those longer term study abroads. So cool. And yeah, Jane says, Lola, it looks like you took advantage. Definitely. And I think, Lola is an example of our students a lot of students will say, oh yeah, I did multiple of these. So it's pretty easy to do more than just one global experience during your program. A lot of students will end up doing a couple of them. So, and these are just some photos of the MAT program in Guatemala, which is a program before you start your experience typically. The Patagonia trip I briefly talked about, and then the Global Connections trip to South Korea. Okay, so moving on to student orgs and fellows programs. So we have over 40 MBA student organizations. These are just some logos of a snippet of what we have. High level, we have student orgs that run the gamut from affinity organizations to career-related organizations. So when you think about, I'm interested in the clean tech, you'll see clean tech has an organization there. Energy finance group, graduate consulting group is very active. So we certainly have those. And then we have organizations that are more just for fun. So we have an MBA soccer club that you'll see there actually hosts the largest soccer tournament among MBA programs in the country. So they had over 30 MBA teams come to Austin this past February, which was super fun. Partners Club is really active for anyone that would be moving to Austin with a partner, Live Music Association, et cetera. So really it just sort of runs the gamut of options there. Most students are members of multiple organizations. So Lola, do you have any orgs that you maybe wanted to highlight briefly as ones that you were involved in as a student? Cool. And you mentioned board fellows. So moving on to this slide, I think students sometimes get confused, or applicants get confused about the difference between fellows groups, which is what you see here on the screen, and our organizations. And at the end of the day, the biggest difference is the organizations that you see here are application based. So they're going to be a little bit smaller, whereas organizations, you can pretty much join any org that you want. These fellows groups might be a little bit more selective depending on the group. So board fellows, I'll let Lola talk about briefly in a second, but that's one where you would apply. They select, I believe, around 60 or so. I could be wrong on that amount, but then you're actually working with a company or a nonprofit in Austin, and you're a non-voting member of the board, and usually have a project entailed. So all of these that you see here, I don't have time to go into the details of every single one, but they do very much involve a little bit extra from a time commitment than a regular organization. Some of them also involve a practicum component where you're working with the company directly during the semester. A lot of them also have a class component tied to it as well. And some will even have an internship. So venture fellows, for example, you're actually interning at a VC or a PE firm during the school year. So they sort of vary on level of competitiveness to get in and what it does. So again, I don't have time to go into all of them, but definitely reach out to us. We can connect you to a student who was involved in one of these fellows groups, and we can talk more. Lastly, you don't have to be involved in a fellows group at Mccombs. So there are definitely students that choose to use their time in other ways. So something to think about. But Lola, you mentioned board fellows. Can you just give a high level of what board fellows is and maybe the company or nonprofit you were involved in? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's a common thread among these fellows groups is really the access that you get is hard to beat. So, if you are interested in one of these areas, it might not be a bad idea to consider applying to the fellows group. But again, not required. All right, so, obviously Mccombs, you may be aware of our class size. If you've looked at our profile, we're usually around 260 to 270 with a 4-to-1 student faculty ratio. So the faculty definitely get to know you on an individual basis. But in addition to the small community at Mccombs, you also get the larger UT Austin community. So, 50,000 students at UT Austin. It's one of the top and one of the largest research institutions in the US. The burnt orange Longhorn symbol is pretty darn well known. And so, you get the benefit of not just Mccombs and Rolling Hall, which I'll show in a second, but you also get the benefit of being at this huge institution. One of those benefits being you can take classes across campus. So you can take up to 6 credit hours that will apply directly to your MBA degree in a different school. So if you wanted to take a law class or an LBJ class, or, there's some cool classes in the School of Architecture, which for real estate folks might, really pique your interest. That is definitely doable. So taking advantage of the whole university, I think is huge. Rolling Hall makes me a little sad to look at these photos, as I'm sure it does Lola, because we're not there right now. But, Rolling Hall is a brand new building, brandish new building. It was opened in March 2018. That is really just for us. And I think that says a lot for the university and the School of Mccombs and the value that it puts in its MBA program. So full-time students have access. It's 5 stories, tons of study space. It's really just frankly beautiful and has everything that we need. It even has a gym and locker rooms in the basement, which is really nice if you're planning to commute to campus via bike or just want a quick workout in between class. We have our own cafe. So I say all this because once we can return to campus and it's safe to return to campus, we are very, very lucky that we have such a good space that not just students use and are there all the time in a good way, but the community has really used as well. So we've been able to expand the conferences that we're bringing in, the speaker series that our students put on. I could probably name you some really top names that have come through and presented in our auditorium in Rolling Hall, and our students are in some cases the driver of that and get the added benefit of in many cases meeting some of those folks. We're able to put on, like I said, larger conferences like the Diversity and Inclusion Conference that is completely student run every year. So really, really lucky to have this beautiful physical space, and we honestly can't wait to get back. So Austin is also something that I think differentiates our program. Lola mentioned it at the beginning as well in terms of, why she applied and what she was looking for. And I think our location is frankly a big piece of that. For those of you that haven't visited Austin, it is one of the fastest growing cities in the nation. I'll show you these statistics. And we've actually, even with everything that's been going on, been pretty lucky from an industry standpoint in Austin. We were also voted very recently sort of top place to be quarantined. So we're, again, just very, very lucky that we're in a place that has so much going for it. Lots of top companies are moving their headquarters here or opening offices here. And, we're known for tech, but it's not all just tech. So the big companies, certainly Facebook, Google, Dell is headquartered here. You're going to hear those names. But we also have consulting firms constantly moving in. Bain, BCG, Deloitte has a large office here. And of course, the startups and entrepreneurship scene that you're going to find and that you've probably heard about. So very, very friendly to entrepreneurs. And there's a very active entrepreneurship ecosystem in Austin. So all in all, our students really use the city as a extension of their, Rolling Hall and of UT campus. Many, many students will intern during the school year at a company in Austin or just get involved in a place like Capital Factory. And it's just really nice that, I think not every MBA program out there has what we have and are able to easily tap into those connections in Austin, even if you don't plan to stay here long term after you graduate, which many of our students do not, still taking the advantage of the 2 years that you're here in a city like Austin. Expansive alumni network. I touched on this a little bit earlier, but we have a lot. So I think it's kind of cool that any Longhorn that you reach out to, they're very, very willing to open their doors and open conversations with you, which is a huge benefit. Longhorns want to hire Longhorns. And we've seen that even with the recent events, our students coming together and our alums coming together and working together to say, hey, here's some opportunities, or let's get the word out there if a Longhorn is hiring. And so it's really great to have that supportive system and that, I guess, that school spirit and that team pride that expands beyond just the Mccombs alumni network. So, think a little bit larger in the have a 500,000 plus UT Austin alumni that are out across the world. And then career. So we'll just give you some high level stats here. 94% of graduating students with employment offers within 3 months. This was last year's data. 100%, of course, with internships. So we actually have an internship requirement. So everyone completes an internship. Average salary and signing bonus, of course, that's going to vary by industry. And then number one, best ROI. So when you look at our tuition and then the average student debt post MBA, we're consistently ranked number one there, which we're really proud of. These are just some high level industry numbers. So I mentioned technology. That's sort of what we're known for in Austin. So it makes sense that a lot of our students are going into tech, about 30%. That's actually going to be higher for international students. It's 50-ish%. And I don't have time to go into the details of why that is, but certainly large tech companies are very open to hiring international students, and there are a lot of opportunities in big tech especially. So some of our larger employers include, of course, Microsoft, Dell, Amazon, and Google, and all those are the worlds, all those big tech. But we also place in small tech. So if you're interested in more of a startup environment or mid-level, mid-sized company, there's lots of opportunities there. Consulting has certainly always been a strength of ours, and financial services as well. So you'll see that. And then the function to the right-hand side, finance, marketing, management, you'll just see the percentages there. So if you're interested in an industry on here that maybe has a smaller percentage, I always tell students, don't get discouraged by that. Certainly there are more niche areas, for example, like healthcare or sports or entertainment media, that just a lesser percentage of students are really going to want to pursue. It doesn't mean that our career team is any less good at helping you in those industries. All that said, though, and I'll talk about this in the admissions portion, I think it is very important to research what an MBA program can give you from a career perspective, and do your goals make sense? But again, I'll talk a little bit about that on a later slide. Lola, I don't know, do you have anything else to add about sort of the career search? And if you say no, that's fine. I just want to give you a chance to say anything. That's awesome. Great. Okay, so we're right on time. I'm going to devote the rest of the time, at least 10 minutes, to admissions. Lola, if you get any questions in the chat box about admissions and you don't know the answer, feel free to just wait and I can verbally answer them afterward. I know that many of you may have more specific questions about this, but high-level overview of the class of 2021 statistics. So we have, as I mentioned earlier, around 260 students per class. We're roughly between 20 to 25% from an international country. And then you'll see the breakdown of non-Texas versus Texas in the US. Those numbers do vary a little bit each year, but that was the class of 2021. Average age is 29. Average years of work experience is 6. average GMAT 704, you'll see on and on, right? GRE 159, and then a 3.42 GPA. So I get a lot of questions about academics. Before I go to the next slide to explain our application components, I do just want to highlight the gray boxes to the right, the middle 80%. I think personally that these are a little bit more helpful than just the flat averages, just because I think people see the averages and assume that that's a minimum, and it is not. So, we have students above those numbers, we have students below those numbers, and we don't have a minimum actually. But in terms of your competitiveness in the pool, certainly being in the middle 80% or close to the average is going to help you sort of gauge where you might fall amongst the competitive application pool. So in terms of the application components, and I saw in the poll earlier that many of you are looking towards next year, and some of you are actually thinking about applying for fall 2020 through our new rolling admission cycle. So I'll try and answer as many questions as I can and speak pretty generally. But the application components overall, the academic profile is definitely one bucket that, I think a lot of applicants assume is the only bucket that matters. And of course, that's not true. It is, however, equally as important as all the other buckets that you see here, work experience and why Mccombs. So you want to submit an application with as strong of an academic profile as you can. GMAT or GRE is required. It will be required for next year. For those of you who are applying in the rolling application cycle, we are offering COVID test exceptions. You do have to fill out a petition. And the reason for that is there is actually a virtual GMAT and a virtual GRE option. And so the petition is really for folks that cannot take the virtual option for personal reasons. So if you think that you need a COVID exception, go ahead and email us. We can send you the form if you didn't already receive it, and you can fill that out and get that exception. But it is not just a blanket test score waiver, right? So you have to fill that out. But the GMAT or the GRE is required. Transcripts are required as well. U.S. bachelor's degree or equivalent, of course, is required. So you have to have graduated undergrad. And then TOEFL or IELTS for international students who do not meet a waiver. There, by the way, are many ways to meet that waiver. I saw some folks from India on this call. I've never seen an Indian applicant who had to take the TOEFL because you generally study in English in your colleges. So sort of what we're looking for there and why we look at academic profile, there's really a couple of reasons. Number one, as I mentioned earlier, the core is hard. The classes are hard, and we want to make sure that you are set up academically to be successful. This is not like undergrad where, people leave the program or transfer out. We want to admit folks that will intend to graduate and make it the whole way through. So we just want to make sure that from an academic perspective, you're adequately prepared to take on the rigor of the program. And then the second piece is just competitiveness in the pool, right? So we received close to 2,000 applications for 260 slots, 260 to 270. So just from a sheer numbers perspective, the stronger your academic profile, the stronger your application will be in that particular pool. So in terms of what you need to get in, if any of you are applying for rolling admission, we do require official transcripts. You will need to have them sent to you, and then you will scan them and upload them. So we are not currently accepting mailed transcripts. We really never did, but especially now because we're all working virtually, mailing a transcript is not a good idea to us. So you'll want to have it sent to yourself. So that's a little bit about academic profile. Again, if you have questions, pop them in the chat box. We can get a little bit more specific on that if you need. But the work experience bucket is equally as important as the academic profile, right? So we really are looking for folks that have at least 2 years of post-undergrad work experience, post-undergrad full-time work experience. We're looking for applicants who have really taken initiative in their roles, who have progressed, if applicable. Obviously, progression means different things in different industries, but we are really looking for applicants that have taken strides in their career and have leadership potential. So you don't need direct reports necessarily to apply, but there's other ways to display leadership potential, whether by taking on projects. A lot of times in the professional recommendation, they'll touch on leadership potential or your ability to work on teams and lead teams. So think about how you can highlight that on your resume. If you have any gaps in work experience or anything you feel like we may have questions about, it's always a good idea to address it in the optional statement. I'd say 9 times out of 10, when I get really specific questions from applicants, my answer is going to be use the optional statement. If you have a concern, if you're like, I don't know about this, what should I explain? Always explain it. It's better to explain than to have us assume anything. So gaps or jumpy work experience is always best explained. Okay, one professional recommendation letter. This preferably comes from a direct supervisor, although we understand in many cases that may not be possible. So if it's not possible, indirect supervisors are great. Previous direct supervisors are great. So someone that used to supervise you. My advice here as well, use your best judgment. So if you feel like this person is the best person to provide a reference for me in a professional capacity, then that person you're thinking of is probably going to be the correct choice. We are more worried about the content than the status of the person. So getting a CFO to write it or a CEO may be impressive, but if they only write 2 sentences about you, it's not super helpful. So really use your best judgment there. And then I mentioned the 2 years of work experience. That is important for a couple of reasons. Again, going back to explaining our sort of reasoning here. Number one, the employers that employ our students, so the companies that come and recruit and want to hire our students, 100% expect previous work experience. So I get a lot of questions from folks still in undergrad. Do we make exceptions? Currently our language is we strongly recommend at least 2 years. Technically, it's not impossible, but in my 5 years of being on this team, I've never seen anyone admitted with less than 2 years of work experience. So, and that's the reason, one of the reasons is definitely the employment piece. The second piece is what you're bringing to the classroom discussion. So I can tell you, even thinking about my own personal work experience, my first year out of undergrad versus my third year out of undergrad, those conversations would be vastly different just because I had a lot more under my belt, a little bit more to bring to the table. So again, 6 years being the average, 3 to 8 years is the middle range of work experience, but really 2 years is going to be our strongly recommended minimum. And then finally, and I'll get to all y'all's questions, I see some popping in. The third bucket that is just as important as the first 2 buckets is the U in Texas Mccombs, which essentially is your goals and why you want to come to Mccombs for your full-time MBA. And this is one of the areas I see, believe it or not, sort of missed the most. And I say believe it or not because I think, again, a lot of folks say, oh, it's all about the academics. But if you don't have reasons for wanting to get our 2-year degree, if you haven't really thought out what you want to do from a career perspective, that can be worrisome for the admissions committee because we would not want someone to enroll that had an idea of what our degree could get them and then be very disappointed when they find out that that's not the case. So from a goal perspective, I'll give you a couple of examples. If we have an applicant that says they want to become an accountant after graduating, that's a little bit of a red flag because we actually don't qualify for you to take the CPA right after. And we don't place folks in direct just accounting roles. We might say, well, why don't they get an MPA? That might be a better fit. If someone wants to go, this is sort of a reach, but if you wanted to go into fashion design, right? That's probably not going to be a good fit for us. So number one piece of advice, do your research, talk to students. You don't have to give us an exact company and a perfect position. We're not asking for that specific of a goal, but we definitely want to know that you know what you want out of this. And you understand why you want a degree, and it's not just because you hate your current job. That is not good enough reason, unfortunately. As true as it could be, that's not enough reason. So do a lot of research. Also do a lot of research on Mccombs in general. So if you want to go into real estate, make sure you know that we have a REIT fund and that we have, what our real estate organizations are. So something as simple as just doing a little bit of homework on what you could be involved in and how you'll give back to the community goes a really long way in the application process. And it shows us that you really want to be here versus just applying to any old school, right? So those are the three buckets. Deadlines on the right side, you'll see all of our round 1, 2, 3, 4 have passed. So currently we are in a rolling admission cycle for the fall 2020. I do not have any dates to give you. I've been getting a lot of questions about, well, what's the last date? My answer is always going to be apply as early as you can. Rolling admission is just that. So it is to continuously fill the class. So the farther you get on into the time frame, the more spots are going to be taken. And at some point we will close the application. So you don't want to ever wait until the last minute, certainly. So apply as soon as you can. And I get a lot of questions about scholarship as well. So scholarship for rolling admission is going to be a lot more competitive. Obviously, we've awarded a lot of our scholarship dollars already. So same situation there, apply earlier. And typically without a GMAT or GRE exam, because we have one less sort of data point to go off of, you may not be competitive for scholarship for fall 2020. So just heads up on that as well. For those of you that are thinking longer term, so fall 2021, the deadlines that you see on the screen will actually stay pretty similar. So they won't be exactly October 8th, but it'll probably be, quite honestly, a day or two before or after that date for the fall. So this will give you a good idea to shoot for the deadline if you're shooting, for example, round 1, which you'll see is priority scholarship deadline for fall 2021. So that was a lot of information I just threw at you all. So let me go ahead and take it to some of the questions. While I'm getting some of the questions, I just want to do a quick shout out for some of our virtual events coming up. Again, I know this was a really high level info session. So if you want to get a little bit more deep into topics, we have one-on-one virtual chats throughout the summer that folks like Lola will be hosting. We do have some topical group chats that will be coming up. We have virtual coffee chats with admissions officers. So there's a lot of opportunities for you to engage with us virtually over the summer. And we're really excited to sort of get to know you a little bit more through this process. All right. So let me go ahead and turn to the questions. Saw the question from India. You are correct. You do not need a TOEFL if you meet one of the waiver criteria. So if your bachelor's degree was in English, you do not need a TOEFL. Oh, and by the way, if any of you hop off, I'll just go through all these questions, so feel free to stick around. But if you do need to hop off, we will be sending out a recording of this. So feel free. We won't be offended if you need to actually go get some work done or something. Question about worth applying to fall 2020. That's definitely a personal call. And the class is not full right now, so I'll give you that short answer. But my advice is apply when you are ready to actually start the program. If you feel like fall 2020 is the best time for you to start, then definitely, I think it doesn't hurt to apply. And in addition, applying for fall 2020, even if you don't get in, that is not going to negatively affect any application that you submit for fall 2021. So my advice is usually, if you really want to start, give it a shot. All you really have to lose is, I guess, $200 of the application fee, but it's definitely not going to sort of negatively impact you if you end up needing to reapply for the following year. Oh, and good, that answers that next question as well. So definitely will not hurt your chances at all. If anything, I actually think that applicants who reapply really shows commitment to the program. So I don't think it's a negative. No preference on GMAT or GRE. Good question. I usually address that and did not. So definitely taking the exam that you're most comfortable with is what I advise. So if you can take a practice test in both to see which format you're most comfortable with, that is not a bad idea. And we have had students that have taken both tests, and you do have to preference which one you want us to look at, but we won't necessarily look at a lower score and hold that against you, right? We only care about your overall highest score. So taking it multiple times is pretty common, quite frankly. Usually I'd say applicants take it 2 or 3 times for a full-time program. So build that into your timeline as well if necessary, that retake, definitely. Essay prompts remain the same for fall 2021 intake. Great question as well. I don't have an answer to that yet. I personally love our prompts, so there could be a good chance that we do keep them, but I would not necessarily go ahead and completely write your responses to those prompts, just in the case that we do tweak them or change them. So usually in July, we will have the new essay prompts available for fall 2021. So keep an eye out for those. And then the application itself for fall 2021 will become available in early August. So question about being remote or in-person classes starting in the fall. So currently the University of Texas is planning on campus. So our plan at the moment is to be on campus in potentially, I won't go into too much of the details, but I don't think it's going to look exactly the same as it did pre-COVID. So whether that means smaller class sizes or classes on lower floors so folks aren't taking the elevator. But with the option for those that can't be in person to take the classes virtually until the need lifts, right? So for international students that can't come to the US, if that's the case, in August, there will be that virtual option. Okay, so I say all that, and that certainly could change. So the University of Texas at Austin decides at the end of the day, and they have a deadline of late June to really give us the final word on what's going to happen in the fall. But as of right now, that's the plan. Question about the work experience. I'm not sure if I answered that, well, let me just clarify. So it is strongly recommended that you have 24 months of work experience. So technically I can't say the word required, but again, I've worked at I've worked at UT for close to 5 years, and I've never seen anyone with less than 2 years of work experience admitted. So it's not an impossibility, but it would be tough. If you have a JD, do you have to submit transcripts for your bachelor's degree and JD, or just one? Oh yeah, I didn't really address that. So you do have to submit transcripts for every single university attended and every program. So if you have a master's or a professional degree, you will need a transcript for that in addition to undergrad. You would also, pretty much any class that you've taken from a 4-year or a graduate level institution, you will need to submit separate transcripts for all of those. So my advice is get started on getting those now. Because sometimes if it's not an electronic transcript sent to yourself, it can take a little bit of time. So, all right, let's see. If you, we answered some of that. We do have dual degree programs, yes. So we generally don't talk about these on this presentation, but we've got a lot of them. Most of them are going to be 3 years. Like, for example, our JD MBA is actually 4 years. So they do vary in structure. So my advice is just go to the website. We have them listed on the curriculum section. And you would usually start in the other program. So if you want, for example, a public policy MBA, you would actually start over at the LBJ school. And then your second year, you would start at the MBA program. Definitely some great veteran resources. So we have a wonderful student veteran services office at UT that is just fantastic. In addition, our current student veterans are great. They have a Texas Veteran in Business organization that you can reach out to. So yeah, just email us and we can actually connect you to a current vet, and they would be more than happy to answer your questions. Good question about the work experience component. The question is that limited to post-undergraduate only or full-time work experience in general? So there are definitely sort of interesting scenarios or exceptions to the post-undergraduate rule. Many folks who enlisted in the military right after high school and then got their undergraduate degree, we are definitely going to count that military experience. I will say that even it depends, I guess, again, on the situation, but an internship during the school year in undergrad is not going to count. So whether it be a summer internship or the situation may be, it really does have to be, think a 40-hour work week, full-time work experience that we're looking for. We do have a great social enterprise concentration. There's a question about nonprofit course opportunities. So yeah, there's some great opportunities there within social enterprise and our corporate social responsibility. We also, back to taking some classes at LBJ. I know a student last year that took a nonprofit accounting class that was actually offered over at LBJ, but was open and cross-listed with MBAs. So there's some great opportunities there. Peter asked about how long will it take for applicants to hear back during this rolling admission period. I don't have a good answer to that either, just because we need some time to review the applications, interviews. And my gosh, I didn't talk about interviewing. I'm so sorry. but interviews are by invitation only. So what we do is we'll occasionally review the rolling applications. Some will get invited to interview. So we sort of have to wait for that to happen, obviously, and then we need to meet back as a committee group to make decisions. So unfortunately, there's not a really good date I can give you because it is just sort of rolling as we go, but we will certainly try to get you a decision as soon as we can once we have all of the components in place. Let's see. I don't know that I understand the scholarship question, so I'm going to skip that one. Essays we just answered, which is great. List of classes. So Jade, if you go to the Mccombs, so it's mccombs.utexas.edu/MBA, and then navigate to curriculum, you can actually find the entrepreneurship concentration roadmap. So I think that's probably going to be the most beneficial for you, just to see the different entrepreneurship classes. Folks that already have a master's degree, how do admissions view that? Definitely not a negative. So if you do have a professional degree already or a graduate degree already, certainly you can use that to your advantage. And usually I find out that it helps folks with their GPAs because they tend to do better in a graduate program for whatever reason. But yeah, not a negative. So certainly I think what we'll do basically from a GPA perspective is average that. So we take your graduate GPA and then your upper division coursework in your undergraduate, and we sort of average that to calculate the GPA that we report out. So we will look at it. It's a nice to have if you have a graduate degree. It's certainly not necessary, but it's definitely not a negative. Yeah. Let's see, for admissions, do we prefer individuals to take time and gain work experience after undergrad before applying for the MBA program or applying immediately after undergrad? Definitely getting work experience, 100%. As I mentioned earlier, I've personally never seen someone straight out of undergrad admitted. So we want you to go out and gain some work experience before. Yeah. And there are, by the way, some MBA programs that don't require work experience. So if you're feeling discouraged, there are programs out there that accept folks straight from undergrad. We just happen to not be one of them. Does McCombs have a list of options for gap years, or can you give examples of favorable examples? Working for nonprofit, Teach for America, etc. I'm not sure I understand that question, but I will say, if you were doing those activities during, let's say, a gap in employment, include them on your resume. So even if you weren't getting paid, that's all considered experience. Teach for America being a great example, that is 100% work experience, and that counts toward your work experience. So we have folks coming from all different types of backgrounds in the program. We have had folks who have been teachers for 10 years. We've had fashion designers in the program, so it's not just folks from a quote unquote traditional business background coming through. So really think about that as you're tailoring your resume. We're not just looking for those quote unquote traditional business backgrounds. We're really looking for variety. And so if you have spent a year or 2 years in the Peace Corps, for example, that's great, include that. We're going to consider that work experience for sure. Letter of recommendation from an entrepreneur. Yes, I think clients and vendors are a great choice for that. Good question. That's pretty common that we'll see that. If you don't have a boss, it's pretty tough to get a direct supervisor to write your letter of recommendation. You absolutely can pick more than one concentration. So if you wanted to take entrepreneurship and private equity, that's great. Just note that you wouldn't actually have time to squeeze in every single class in both of those concentrations. You only have so much time in your day. So you'd likely need to pick and choose the classes from each concentration, but you can really mix and match. Yeah, thanks for asking. So I know we have 1 minute, y'all, so if you do need to hop off, please hop off, but I'll answer these last couple of questions and then close it. So the interview component is part of, let me just go back to this slide, the UIn Texas Mccombs, which I completely forgot to mention. So it is by invitation only. So we look at your application and then we invite certain applications to interview that we want to learn more about. Currently, the interview is virtual. So all of our interviews are being conducted virtually by current students. It is not a trick question type interview. So it's going to ask you questions about your work experience, what you want to do with your MBA. It's behavioral. So, just be as prepared as you can by researching the program, knowing, being ready to talk about your resume and your work experience. And usually they last about 30 to 45 minutes. Okay, great. I'll take a couple of more questions. I know we're running out. What do you mean upper coursework from undergrad? So we look at all of your classes when we're making a decision, but in terms of how the Graduate and International Admissions Center averages GPA, this 3.42 that you see on the screen is actually a recalculated GPA from the University of Texas based upon your upper division coursework. Generally speaking, that's 300 level, 400 level, junior, senior level classes. So I can't give you a more exact answer than that, but just every school is different, but that's in general how they calculate that GPA. Yes, mentioned being able to speak with recent MBA grads personally about the program. So if you go to our website and you sign up, there's actually some virtual one-on-one chats that folks like Lola and some of our other recent graduates are conducting every single day. So you could probably register for one of those as early as tomorrow or the next day. And those are going to be one-on-ones. So really an opportunity for you to ask them questions a little bit more in detail. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, we're 2 minutes over. So I want to close it down. I really appreciate everyone's questions. I hope this was helpful. Again, continue to engage with us. This is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of information about the program. So as you have questions, you'll see the Texas MBA email there. Please email us anytime. We're always willing and ready to answer your questions. Special thanks to Lola, who hopped on the call, and congratulations on graduation. Yeah, thank you all very much. And we look forward to getting to know you a little bit more through this process. Have a great rest of your day.
There's a difference. I want to do it and I want to be a rock star, right? Like, and that's where you influence people. Like, you know, like I want to do it, but I also want to be the most popular. And so then that person's like, oh, I want to be him. So I guess I'll be nice. Like I want to literally take people who have DNA that's kind of nice and make them more nice